Enforce the current law before you talk about changing any law.
This would be a very good time for you to shut up.
Don't you know? Don't you know that that's any possibility that could never happen?
It is our time to do all we can do, and it's an urgent time.
Don't you know that?
And now, Burnie Thompson, where the golden age of radio lives on.
This is going to be a fun one today. This is going to be really fun. I have with us somebody I've been following on Twitter, one of my favorite tweets, if that's what we're called, and always tweeting about liberty, always from a free market economic standpoint, and if I'm right, an objectivist standpoint. We're going to find out if I'm right in a minute because we've got with us Jack, who is at OA Select on Twitter. Jack, are you with us?
I'm here, Burnie. Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to have you. I know a lot of other people are too, on Periscope, on YouTube, on My Freedom Radio, to actually put a voice with the text now. Man, it's great to meet you.
Same to you, Burnie.
So tell me, first of all, Jack, what is your background and how did you get so involved on Twitter? You have, I think you have somewhere around 15,000 followers, and they're all, when you tweet something, it always is championing liberty and you get a lot of responses from it. What's your background and how long have you been on Twitter?
I think I've been on Twitter for about 3 years now. I am, I think I told you before, I'm actually retired from HP, Hewlett Packard. I was in the IT industry for about 33 years, 27 of those years at HP and EDS. HP acquired EDS. And I've just been a long-time proponent of liberty and a long-time proponent of capitalism. And I just jumped on Twitter one day and decided to start sharing my views and my opinions about it, and it seemed to resonate with people a lot. And I came at it from not just a capitalism from an economic standpoint, but from a moral standpoint, and that's kind of been my mission on Twitter.
You know, it's been really interesting
sure
because what sets you apart, I think, from most people who tweet a lot about politics is, first of all, you interact a lot. You get into a lot of debates with people. And what Miss Sarah Moon loves about your tweets is how you are so logical. You're almost like Ayn Rand meets Mr. Spock. You know, they just can't get you off track, no matter how snarky they get. And what else I really like about what you do, Jack, on Twitter, as you promote liberty and freedom, is you associate capitalism with morality. You never back away from that. As a matter of fact, you point out that if you don't have voluntary exchange, really there is no morality in a planned economy, is there?
Exactly right, Burnie. And to your first point, I'm very intentional about staying measured and level-headed and just using logic and reason to make my argument. And it often exposes people who are trying to use emotions as tools of cognition instead of reason. And they tend to veer off and start getting ugly. And as far as I'm concerned, that just exposes them for who they are and that they don't really have a good argument.
It's almost like I try to do on the radio, Jack. You know, I don't usually call people a jackass, but I'll definitely give them time to prove that they are one sometimes.
yeah, exactly right. That's pretty much just giving them enough rope to hang themselves, and I think that it demonstrates. I've had several people ask me, why do you do that? Why do you keep debating people? You're never going to change their mind. And for the most part, I do believe that the actual people that I'm debating are not going to change their mind. It's unlikely, but I've noticed that there's many other people that are watching, and several people have sent me direct messages and said, I really learned a lot from that exchange, some things that I never thought of before, or give me a lot to think about. So while I'm debating, I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm likely not going to change the mind of the person I'm debating, but there's a lot of other people watching that are on the fence, or that just haven't considered some of the things that I'm talking about, like the morality of capitalism.
It's amazing because even when I hear it, and I'm a free market guy, even when I hear it, there has been so much indoctrination in America that capitalism is not moral. It's not fair, right? The problem with capitalism is, according to the critics, is it's unfair and it's chaotic. This is what they tell us. Now, the thing we have going for us, though, Jack, don't we, is experience. I mean, I really believe that if Karl Marx or was it Groucho? If Karl Marx woke up today and looked around, he would say, God, I was so wrong, because we've had the experience. It's been tried now. I think Karl Marx would say he's wrong, but no matter the experience, Jack, there are enough on the left who will never lose faith in a planned economy. What do you think is the appeal of their planned economies?
I mean, Ed, and that's a great point, Bernie. I mean, the reality is that there is no amount of data that is going to prove that capitalism is the best economic system to people. Unfortunately, we don't have a pure experiment today. There is no example of pure capitalism to point to say, this is what it is, and, the evidence is incontrovertible. But there's certainly endless examples of relative situations, relative examples. If you want to go back to East and West Germany, or in North and South Korea, there's just no rational person could actually deny, that capitalism pulls people out of poverty by the hundreds of millions. That's not really debatable by any rational person. But the fact of the matter is, even if we had a perfect example of capitalism to point to and say, see, this is what it does, it wouldn't matter, because people on the left, and I would argue even some that are supposedly anti-left, deep down they believe that there's something that's immoral about capitalism. Even if it works, even if it creates endless prosperity, there's something immoral about it, because it's selfish, because it's all based on rational self-interest, that people are pursuing their own lives and they're pursuing their own self-interest. And if you aren't serving other people, or you don't feel a moral duty to serve other people, or you don't feel like that your life belongs to the tribe as opposed to belonging to yourself, then you're immoral, you're wrong. So it almost doesn't matter what evidence is created. There's people that are going to believe that it's a selfish system, and it's just wrong because you're not living your life for the benefit of other people.
Yeah, you know what you stick on is basically, and you don't use this word very often, I do, but when I read your stuff on Twitter, and again, if you want to find Jack Owens on Twitter and follow some of his commentaries that I find incredibly insightful and entertaining often even, it's at the little @ sign, and it's OA, just OA Select, at OA Select, and follow.
It's actually OAA, 2 A's.
Oh, OAA Select. Darn it! I put it wrong on the description of this video. Well, thank you for pointing that. It's OAA Select, and the little @ sign from it. You can follow him on Twitter. But it really is about the morality of self-ownership. I mean, somebody asked me one time. I was speaking to a college class, and the professor, who was a lefty, and we used to debate. She was very friendly, but she said, "Bernie, what's the American dream to you?" And do you know, Jack, 5 years ago, when I was asked that question, I didn't have a good answer, and I didn't BS about it either. I said, I don't know if I can tell you. And I thought about it all weekend long, and I eventually wrote a column on it. And here's what I came to the conclusion of. What is the American dream? Well, it's having a home with a white picket fence or not. It's doing what it's living a self-directed life. If you want to be an artist and be broke, it's your life. It's your pursuit of happiness. So it really came down to me to self-ownership. Sort of like what John Locke said, we all have a property in our person. Nobody owns us, and that to me is really what you're always talking about. And you can see it in the greatest Twitter bio quote there is. You wrote in your Twitter bio, "My life is not your business." I'm sorry. My life's not your business, and your life is not my fault. That's the greatest quote ever. Where did you get that?
I don't know. I mean, I heard that somewhere. It's not attributable to anywhere. I either heard it somewhere or I cobbled it together from, several things I heard, but it just summarized my philosophy perfectly. And, to your point, Bernie, one of the things that the left opposes about capitalism, particularly pure capitalism, and that's what I advocate for, is pure laissez-faire capitalism, because it's the only system, it's the only moral system that is allows for the freedom of expression you're talking about, that you were just talking about, the freedom to decide what you're going to do with your life, who you're going to cooperate with, who you're going to trade with. It all comes down to the individual choice. But one of the big things that is opposed by the left and others is the fact that capitalism is going to inevitably create inequality. That we are all different, we all have different talents, we all have different drive, we have different motivations, and when you have freedom, you are going to necessarily have inequality. That is the reality of it. And there's some people that just cannot stand that.
F.A. Hayek, F.A. Hayek's one of my favorite economists. He won the Nobel Prize in economics, I think, in 1974. And he wrote the great book, I'm sure you're familiar with, The Road to Serfdom. And F.A. Hayek has a great quote, Jack. He says, what does he say? It's something about there's all the difference in the world between equal opportunity and trying to make everyone equal. One has to do with coercion. Right. One has to do with coercion. The other has to do with merit. And that's what you're always promoting, merit. Yes, because I believe it's perfectly moral for inequality to happen as a result of freedom. Yeah. That is a moral system. That is, people are going to reach their own level. They're going to make the best life with what they have available to them. And the only thing that's immoral is any attempt to try to correct that. Any attempt to say, no, that can't be happening. This person, there's no way they can have that much money or that much success, and this other person not have that much success. So we have to correct that. It's this idea that your life, as it exists, just because you were born and just because you've had some success, that your life belongs to the tribe or the state or whoever it is, and we're going to use your life and we're going to use your wealth as we see fit, and we'll let you know how much we need, and we'll let you know when we need it, and we'll make the decision about spreading the wealth around and making sure that everybody gets some of it. And you point out too, Jack, that Bernie, that idea that your life belongs to the tribe or the hive, it is literally, in my view, is the foundation for every bloody human horror in history. Mm-hmm. It's this idea that your life is a sacrifice
for some greater good for the state. That's why you exist, and it's not for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Is the foundation that was used, that spilled all the blood and communism and fascism and all the other horrors in history.
Our current President Fair Shares and Shared Responsibilities, as I call them sometimes, President Fair Shares. They always do what you point out. They always call for forced sacrifice for their own good. And if Obama has an overriding sort of theme, I would say it's this. Obama walks around, and within every speech he gives, whether it's to Africa when he said they can't have houses, air conditioning, and cars, or the planet would boil over, it basically comes down to there's too much for you, not enough for me. That's pretty much Obama. Too much for you, not enough for me. And that is at the heart of every collectivist pretty much that I've ever seen. Promises of equality, but as Churchill and others pointed out, it really comes down to equal misery. Everywhere you look, everywhere it's been tried. And you know what they always say, Jack? Well, it's because we haven't had our chance. It hasn't been tried scientifically. We're smart enough to get it right this time. But they're not, are they? Ever.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when you get support from the Pope and others, for that morality, then you've got a real problem. You've got from all sides, from everywhere, people believing that, and that's what it comes down to with me, Bernie. This idea that I think we really have to reject is this idea that your life is a sacrifice to the state. I mean, people are made to feel guilty for their success,
mm-hmm.
and that you can't really. I'm not talking about benevolence. I'm not talking about charity. I'm not talking about choosing, who you want to help and that sort of thing. I'm talking about feeling this, experiencing this sense of moral obligation that you can't have happiness, you can't have freedom without conditions attached. Unless you're living your life to the benefit of others, you are immoral. Your success is illegitimate, and I don't think that was the idea that we wanted in the beginning.
Jack,
the framers had in mind.
I actually have I have a speech. I make the argument, and it's a counterintuitive argument, and I have found that much wisdom is counterintuitive until you really start thinking it through. I make the argument that work is actually more noble and benevolent even, but more noble than charity. I compare work, charity, and entitlements. And everybody usually agrees that entitlements is the least noble. But they can't believe I say work is more noble than charity. And my reason is this. First of all, there can be no charity without productivity. And productivity includes work. So you have to have work to have charity at all. Secondly, if you have more work, you have less need for charity. And third, the only way to really feel accomplished is to be productive. And so I make that argument that work is more noble than charity. And entitlements are actually immoral because it's forced, it's coerced.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it, Bernie. Yaron Brook, the director of the Ayn Rand Institute, always makes the point about, that Bill Gates did far more good as the CEO of Microsoft than he will ever do giving away his money. He created jobs, he created value for people, he revolutionized the way that we work and do business, but people will always view Bill Gates as what he's doing now, just giving away his money, as being more moral than pursuing his self-interest,
mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what capitalism is pursuing your self-interest. The government's job is to protect and defend your rights, and your job is to go out and make the best life for yourself.
I'll tell you what, Jack,
doing that. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you would you consider yourself an objectivist?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
And I'll explain what that is for folks. Ayn Rand's political philosophy. It's kind of like Bruce Lee, right? Bruce Lee started off, he was a kung fu guy, but then he made up his own thing called Jeet Kune Do. And it was like a little bit of the best of everything, and that was his thing. Well, Ayn Rand did that too, and she developed a philosophy she called objectivism. And it really was about you own yourself, and liberty and freedom is inherent in your humanity. But she was an atheist. She hated big government and religion. But her arguments, especially in the book Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, where she shows that rights can never collide and why. But when I read you on Twitter, I see objectivism in your writing, and I wonder if you would consider yourself an objectivist, or did it sort of inflect your philosophy?
You know, I mean, the only reason I would not call myself an objectivist is because it almost sounds like, you know, that it almost feels like a conversion of some,
like you're a disciple,
of some sort, or like I went to, like I'm such an individualist, you know, that it's hard for me to say, you know, like I had some sort of experience that where, you know, one day I was not an objectivist and the next day I am. You know, I went to the altar, and you know, so do I strongly advocate and follow, you know, the philosophy of rational egoism? Yes, I do. I mean, and my beliefs are all consistent with that philosophy. But that's the only distinction I make, Bernie. But yeah, it heavily influences my thinking. So the idea that your life, you know, my life belongs to me, and my moral responsibility is to make the best life that I can for me and the ones that I choose to love, and that nobody else can tell me who I'm supposed to love and who I'm supposed to care for, and I have no moral obligations except those that are chosen, the ones that people that I choose to take care of. I don't live by guilt, you know. I don't feel bad for any success that I've had, and I don't do things out of a moral duty. I do them because I choose to do them, because they are consistent with my value system.
Miss Sarah Moon is listening to you right now, and she is giving you all kinds of hearts on Periscope. I mean, that's her overriding philosophy. She doesn't believe in guilt. She believes in living your life your way, and you know, doing things in with other people in a mutually voluntary way. You know, I'll tell you what's interesting to me too, is, you know, you never make a religious argument or for capitalism, but there actually are some to be made, and I don't usually either, Jack. But I just wanted to point this out: the biblical lesson of the talents, which was like money in Jesus's day, right? Three guys get basically money. And the guy who's the most productive, not the guy who saved it, but the guy who was the most productive, like Bill Gates, was the one Jesus said should have more of the talents, right? More of the money. So you can actually look through even the Bible and find out that, you know, he was a smart guy. Only people who deny reality would say that productivity is not the way.
Yeah, I mean, there are examples like that, and there are other examples that, you know, tend to, you know, kind of, you know, collide with the idea of capitalism and living, you know, guilt-free in pursuit of your own self-interest, you know. So it's just I don't know, you know, I admittedly steer away from a lot of religious debates. I just try to stick with, you know, the moral philosophy and moral principles that I believe are consistent with capitalism.
And that's very objectivist of you, because I think the irony of Ayn Rand, one of the beautiful things to me about Ayn Rand, is she didn't use the natural rights theory, but she did say that rights are inherent in our humanity, and they existed before people. And if Mother Nature gave them to us, you can call it that, but she doesn't say they come from a creator because she didn't believe in that. So the irony to me is that Ayn Rand was an atheist, but she made a moral argument for self-ownership and liberty and productivity and harmony better than most religious people I've ever heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you notice that people conflate the terms capitalism and cronyism? When you make the case for capitalism, don't you find people arguing with you as though capitalism is cronyism?
Yeah, in fact, I've told people that, that capitalism can't, I refuse to have capitalism serve a sentence for the crimes of statism or cronyism. That's very often what I end up trying to defend, and I explain to people that we don't have capitalism, so they're arguing against the merits of cronyism or statism, and I tell them, sorry, I can't defend that. You're going to have to find somebody else,
right,
to try to defend that, because they aren't the same thing at all.
They truly don't understand what capitalism or free markets is. Let's try to define it, Jack, because people think in terms of concepts and definitions. So let's define capitalism. One of my definitions is, I have a few, but when I think of capitalism, I think of self-interest plus honest dealings. Self-interest plus honest dealings. Of course, you have to have private property, ownership rights, rule of law. But how would you define capitalism? A system by which what?
Boy, that's a good question. My answer, my one-word answer is freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That it's capitalism is the freedom, as I mentioned earlier, it's the freedom to choose the course of your own life. It's the freedom to choose your associations, the freedom to innovate and create and work and make the choices for your life. Now that starts to get very long, but I see, that in true capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, the government only exists to protect the individual rights of people. That to protect people from being cheated and against fraud and that sort of thing. For people to be required to live up to their contracts. Otherwise, government doesn't have a role.
I think there are really two things.
Freedom.
If we as people pretty much did two things, I think we would live in such harmony and prosperity and productivity. And those two things are this. Number one, do not encroach. Don't encroach on each other. And number two, do what you say you're going to do. Honor your contract. If those two things are done, you need very little government. In other words, a government should protect us as best it can from force and from fraud. And as you said, everything else should be left to us.
Exactly. We're free to voluntarily cooperate, choose to trade with whom we want, choose the work we want, and government should not be involved in, who makes what products and who sells what to who and who pays a certain amount to whom. That's something that should be done by voluntary, free people making that decision to trade with each other. It's actually very simple. It just gets very complicated when there's people that just want to, they just want power. And one thing about capitalism is, a real capitalist is a person that doesn't want to be ruled and also has no interest in ruling other people.
Yeah, one thing about capitalism is it disperses power. As a matter of fact, I would argue that he does it better than anything else. I mean, sometimes you hear people talk about, well, this business dominates the market or owns the market or something like that. And I like to say, what do you mean, like A&P, the old grocery store? What do you mean, like one of these old companies, right, that they said had everything, right? But soon, because of innovation and because of people's tastes and interests, and other people pursuing their own self-interest with honest dealings, those companies go away and new companies come around. It really disperses power in the most fair and voluntary way, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because there is no artificial power. I mean, the only power that exists, if that's the word, is based on what you're able to create. You can't buy power through the government with real true capitalism. That's purchase power, but the power, the only power that someone has in a real free marketplace is the power to compete and to be better than the other person or to innovate something new. And and consumers decide whether you're viable or not. It's not something that's decided. Winners and losers aren't decided by government with guns.
That's really awesome what you just said. And but first, I want to point this out because I meant to say it earlier. I keep glossing over it. I have my little notes I've written down. And we're talking with Jack Owens, and I know him on Twitter. He is one of my very favorite commentators on Twitter, and you can find him with the little @ symbol, and it's OAA Select. OAA Select. And I highly encourage that you follow him, and you'll love when he gets tangled up with somebody in a debate about liberty and economics. I always feel sorry for the other people. No matter how many there are, I think, damn, they just don't stand a chance with Jack. But Jack, when I think of capitalism, I like to, when people ask me about it, I like to say this. I like to say it is the worst it's the worst economic system ever devised, except for all the others. It's sort of what Churchill said about democracy, right? Democracy is the worst political system ever, except for all the others. And that's what I've learned with economics is you can't compare perfect with anything. You have to compare reality with reality. And so one of the greatest questions I've ever learned to ask by studying economics is, and people hear me say this all the time, compared to what? Bernie, what do you think about Obamacare? Compared to what? Bernie, what do you think about Romney? Compared to who? That's always the question that we should ask. And Thomas Sowell pointed out that is the question. He said 2 economists are walking down the street, and they always ask this question, economists. And he said they haven't seen each other in years, and one of them says, "Hey, Bob, how you been? How you doing? How's your wife?" And he says, "Compared to what?"
Yeah.
But
exactly.
would you agree that is one of the great because whenever people debate you, they always compare it to perfect.
Yeah, compared to perfect, and I don't pretend to know. That's the interesting thing. I don't pretend to know exactly what real freedom would produce and create. I just know that we would be free. That is a virtue in itself. That is the end goal, is that people decide the course of their own lives. And the government just protects them from criminals and protects them from, we're supposed to protect us from the government too. But I can't, nobody could ever know what people are going to do and what they're going to end up deciding, as long as they're not lying and cheating and stealing, and as long as they're being moral, then freedom is just going to take its own course and people are going to decide what to do. And that to me is goodness. That's moral. It's not what I can guarantee is an outcome.
It is so
and that's
awesome.
Why, Bernie, I keep coming back to, I don't like arguing about outcomes with capitalism, because when you talk about capitalism, people will, immediately they'll start saying, well, that's because it had a mixture of socialism. That's why it's good. That's why we created the middle class and that sort of thing. That's why I always come back to the moral argument of capitalism. You can't engineer people. You can't engineer societies, and that always ends badly when you try to engineer societies. Freedom is the only way to go, is just to allow people to decide the course of their own lives and allow people to make the best life they can with what they have.
I really love that morality is the best argument for capitalism, not outcomes. Even though it's clear that outcomes
Yes.
are better,
Even though it's clear.
it's still not the best argument, though. And I love that you do that. You mentioned a moment ago that consumers should decide. And Jack, here's what else I've noticed in economic arguments is that there are really three parties involved in an economy. One, well, if you don't include the government. Number one, you've got owners. Two, you've got workers. They're always talked about, the owners and the workers, the minimum wage, right? The middle class economy, all that stuff. But what's almost always left out is consumers. Consumers are the ones who, left to their choice, would be the ones to decide what the owners and the workers do. And do you notice that in economic arguments about fairness, the consumers always get hosed? They always are the ones left out because the prices just go up a little bit all the time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the left, I think, secretly believes that people are too stupid to make their own choices, so elites have to make the choices for them or have to limit the choices that they have. I'm a big believer that, and over time, if you do start making enough choices for people, obviously we see this with the welfare state and so many other examples, when you make choices for people, they do become unable to make choices. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, you take away people's ability to choose, and then you say, see, they're too stupid to choose. And then so now you got to put more control over their lives because we're making them stupid, and now we got to limit their choices even more.
It's like where I live in Florida, in North Florida, beautiful Panama City Beach. We have lots of dolphins, and they've made it a $10,000 fine if you feed the dolphins, because they say then the dolphins will forget how to hunt and how to feed themselves. To which I always say we should apply that to people, and the next politician who votes or moves to give more people food stamps or SNAP, or I call it SMAC because it's as addictive as that. I think the politicians ought to be fined. The next damn politician that says we're going to feed people, we're going to treat people worse than we treat animals, we ought to find their asses and pull them, get them far away from government because they don't belong there. It's the same. It's the same argument.
Yeah, it's frustrating to me that I just don't hear people that are, particularly the people that are allegedly the opposition to the left. I get so frustrated that they can't make a good moral argument. The left, Bernie, they do, in my view, they do such a fantastic job of advocating for their morality, and building policy and creating a vision that's based on their morality. Their politics are all about their morality, and their basic belief is that, what I mentioned earlier is that your life essentially belongs to the tribe or the state or the village, and we will dispose of it as we see fit for this greater good. Your individual life is not really important. It's just that we have to continue this thing, this entity, and we're going to be using people toward that end. And they're very good at creating that vision and convincing people that your life really isn't your own. And so everything they do is consistent with that. And it's my belief that the left is very unsatisfied. They're unhappy with the progress that's been made in their direction. But I just think that they're better and more consistent at establishing their morality and building their policy on it.
They really are.
Now,
but you know what they do is they put the right on its heels all the time. And one thing I love about you is what I never do. I never allow them to put me on my heels. I never do that. So when they say you don't want people to get a raise, you don't want minimum wage, I never fall backwards. I always say, What are you talking about? Minimum, first of all, they're trying to frame the discussion and color the conversation wrong. So I got to correct that first. So I always say, wait a minute, you're the one who wants to criminalize jobs and ban work. What are you talking about? I always put them right back on their heels. Now, the right isn't very good at that. They'll go into these long dissertations about underemployment, and then everybody's eyes are glazed over. Why don't we just say minimum wage is all about criminalizing work? The hell are you talking about? I mean, isn't that the answer?
Yeah, they're terrible at making a moral argument.
Yeah.
That's in opposition to that leftist morality that I talked about. It ends up being just relativism. I mean, when your argument is we don't like what you're doing because you're doing too much of it, so we want to do less of it. That's not a good argument. You're not going to win that. If you want to see a Republican squirm, all you have to do is tell him that he hates the poor and that he hates old people and he hates the infirmed, and watch him squirm. Watch him explain how,
right.
No, I care about them as much as you do.
Yeah, they fall back on their heels. Right into the ropes.
There's nobody saying, I'm not naive enough to think that we could end the welfare state, a week from Friday. But I would like to see, like the left does, I would like to see the left opponents make a moral argument that says, you know what, it's immoral. It is in fact immoral to take the property of a man who earned that property and give it by force to another person who has claimed, made a moral claim on that property just because they need it more than you do.
Mm-hmm.
They need it more than the person that earned it. So that is by default theirs. And the government's job is to move it from position A to position B. I would like to be able to somebody say, that's immoral to do that. And we have to start moving in the direction of correcting that. Now, that doesn't mean, we're going to be pushing Graham out the cliff tomorrow and all that. It just means that we're going to start moving in that direction. Our goal is 0 plane crashes.
Yeah, right. And my thing is, listen, here's the thing I notice about many on the left is they pretend to care more, right? So their rhetoric is all about fairness and justice, but their driving force always seems to be envy. Because as long as there's one guy more successful than they are. I used to be a Marxist, Jack. When I was 23, I was following Dr. David Baker around Riverside Community College, and he was a self-professed Marxist. I took 3 of his sociology classes, and I would walk around basically, with my fist in the air. If I had an afro, I would have put a pick in it, man. I thought I was going to stick it to the man, because it was a great cop-out, Jack. I could say, gosh, the reason I'm not doing so hot is because that guy's doing great. And it's really, I view it as the philosophy of envy, but they always pretend to care more.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Burnie. That is, if you could sum up Marxism, if you had to sum it up in one word, it would probably be envy.
Envy's it?
It's envy that is used to rile people. To say that person, and that gets back to the morality of capitalism. When capitalism creates the inevitable inequities that it's going to create, there's going to be people that point the finger and say, that can't be right. He could not have achieved that unless he lied and cheated and stole. He had to have done something wrong or something immoral. There's no other way to explain why that guy has more than the other guy. He's taking advantage of you. He's exploiting you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. One of my favorite ancient Chinese proverbs, Jack, and I only know 4, but one of my very favorite ancient Chinese proverbs is this one: the more beautiful answer to the more beautiful question. And one thing I notice is people who ask great questions are great thinkers, and they come up with the best answers. And so I think that a lot of people ask the wrong question. They ask, why is there poverty? Well, as you know, we learned from, oh gosh, who was it? Thomas Hobbes. Life is nasty, brutish, and short, and has been. I mean, the natural state of things for human beings has been poverty. The anomaly in human history is wealth. So the question is not why is there poverty, but why is there opulence? Why is there wealth? Isn't that the better question?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that's how we might be able to get some people to think a second time about these things.
Yeah, and I keep coming back like a broken record, Bernie, to the fact that that is a great question. Why is there? And to some people, it's just irrelevant, because if it's done, if people are left behind and people don't and people are unequal, then there's just something inherently evil about it, and it can't happen. So let's go back to 300 years ago where everybody was poor.
Right.
That's a reality. I mean, 99% of people, at one time, everybody was poor. And, there's no debating the fact that, that people, even people in poverty, are better off when there's more billionaires around. That's the reality.
Well, their zero-sum fallacy is what gets them every time. They think the pie never grows is one problem. And you know what else I noticed that they do, Jack, is, and this is something, again, that the Republicans, first of all, they don't understand usually, but what they do, the left does, is, again, they frame the debate and color the conversation by conflating ideas like capitalism and cronyism. They conflate that into one thing. But here's another one. I had a professor at Penn State tell me that rugged individualism is wrong, and it's a bad American value, because cooperation should be prized more than just living out on your own by yourself. And do you see the trick he did, Jack? He turned rugged individualism into hermetism, like a hermit. Nobody says rugged individualism is somebody who goes out and lives by himself. It just means he cooperates with his neighbors. The government doesn't take things by force. They conflate ideas, and they start the conversation in the wrong place. And it takes guys like you and me to just fix that whole thing. Boom, put it right where it belongs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ayn Rand has a great quote about, that she says that a man is not a lone wolf, and he's not a lone wolf, nor is he a social animal. He's a trader. He decides, he chooses his associations, and he cooperates with other people, and both people do that to pursue their rational self-interest, and they trade with each other for mutual benefit. That's what rational men do, is that they pursue their lives, and they find people that are like-minded, and they trade with people to their mutual benefit. They don't sacrifice their life for anyone else, nor do they expect anyone else to sacrifice their life for them.
Yeah, Jack, Tom, F.A. Hyatt calls it a spontaneous order. I love that term, spontaneous order, where you basically, our personal self-interest and honest dealings, we do that, and we reach a place where there's more harmony, more productivity. Everybody's better off. We don't even have to go back 300 years, Jack. We go back to 1950. Nobody, and I mean nobody, had air conditioning or computers. Now, if I didn't have air conditioning and computer, I'd feel like a pauper, I mean, just in that short period of time.
Right.
It's remarkable. I want to ask you, before we let you go, Jack, I want to ask you about, when did you become very interested in liberty and economics? And I also want to ask you, which books and which philosophers most influenced your thinking?
It's been a long time, Bernie. I mean, I go back to, I can tell you the first time I was exposed to Ayn Rand. I'd grown up and lived in southeast Michigan, in the Detroit area, my whole life, and there was a local radio host, and his name was Mark Scott. He's he died long ago from cancer, but he was, you talk about a lone voice in the wilderness. This is a guy that was talking about Ayn Rand and liberty and freedom, and I kind of went through the self-destructive Marxist thing too, you know, in my early 20s, but I found him in my mid-20s, and he got me interested in Ayn Rand, and I just started pursuing and reading that, and just, I guess, just gradually over time just became more and more of a fierce proponent of capitalism and freedom. But, you know, Ayn Rand was a very big influence on my thinking, for sure.
One of the greatest things she ever taught me in a book called Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, is that rights don't collide. So when people ask me, why is healthcare not a right, I was able to answer it quickly. And that's the thing I love, is clarity, succinctness. I love being able to, I love that. And so now I know it's because you can't lay claim on another person's life. And when you see that happen, you see what appears to be rights colliding, but in reality, rights cannot collide. If you see two rights colliding, you've identified something that's not a right.
Exactly right.
It's awesome stuff.
If your so-called right requires any money or action on my part, it's not a right. I mean, a right by the definition is the freedom for you to pursue action. You know, the pursuit of happiness.
Yep. To live a self-directed life.
It doesn't provide anything for you.
Yep. It's awesome stuff.
It provides opportunity.
Yep. Awesome stuff. Jack, I appreciate it, man. I look forward to this. And again, I want to let everybody know they can find you on Twitter with the little @ symbol at OAA Select, OAA Select. And again, the greatest bio line you'll find on Twitter is in Jack's bio, where it says, "My life is not your business and your life is not my fault." I think that's just awesome stuff. And if I ever run for office, which I can pretty much guarantee you that ain't happening, that's going to be it. That one, here's my lines if I run, Jack. It's going to be that one, and it's going to be, actually, nobody owes you Jack. That's my other one. Vote for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Those two things kind of summarize my philosophy.
Well, let's do it again sometime. And again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I know everybody else does too.
Burnie, thanks so much for having me.
All right, we'll talk soon.
All right, take care, buddy.
All right, there he is from Twitter at AA Select. He is one of my very favorite people to read his little short commentaries on liberty, his short commentaries on freedom, and especially as it relates to economics. That's fun for me. I know a lot of people say, we got to talk about Donald Trump. We got to talk about the horse race, man. What's going on? Who's ahead of whom? And I'm thinking, I'd much rather talk to Tho Bishop about Alexander Hamilton, or I'd much rather talk to Jack from Twitter about liberty and about economics, and find out, how did he get to this point in his life where he defends it all the time. All the time he defends it. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for us. I'm Burnie Thompson. Thanks for being with us. MyFreedomRadio.com, Periscope, and on YouTube. I hope you'll go to YouTube. We're on there now. And type in My Freedom Radio, and please subscribe to it. It would mean a lot to me. I appreciate it, and I'll see you tomorrow right here.